Hello, all of you wonderful and lovely people. My name is For Extraordinaire, and yes, I'm still working on the name. But that's not what's important. What's important right now is that I have something interesting here today, and that is a little brochure or something brochure-esque. It's certainly a little pamphlet that the team over at PDX has composed for us. For those interested in Victoria 3, I certainly am, and I've been very impressed by some of the statistics and just general management and controllability that you can have over the different loading screen, not loading screens, but the different resources and icons and everything. So I just have to say that there's definitely been a few shortfalls, I think, with Victoria 3 in terms of the lack of pie charts. That is kind of crushing me. But I still really love the economical management side of that. So I just want to get into breaking this down and kind of talking about it because I know this hasn't been circulated too much throughout most of the Victoria 3 community, at least from what I've seen. I could be wrong, but for those of the less initiated, for those who don't really frequently check the PDX forums, I wanted to break this down and talk about what you can expect really from Victoria 3, and I think this pamphlet does a great job at doing that. So it starts off with a little quote from Queen Victoria: "Give my people plenty of beer, good beer, and cheap beer, and you'll have no revolution among them." Obviously talking about a little amenities there, but they have some wonderful artwork to accompany some of these brief descriptors. For example, they're talking about scale, which is very important in games like Victoria, where you're managing your population, of course. They have 1 billion people at game start, which is a ton, but we're of 800 million in subsistence economies, so they're not really going to be concerned too much about some of those uncolonized areas, at least in the early game. Then 750 states. That is pretty big. I'm not too sure how many states Victoria 2 had, but that is a lot to deal with. I think that's more than EU4. And then they have 140 plus markets, which is a lot. And then I'm guessing more civilized countries have markets, but I think they'll get into that later on. And then they have 500 million GDP at game start. And then a lot of that in private sector, 50 building types, 50 goods types, which is actually very diverse. That's going to be important in monopolies too. And this is going to be updated a lot, which is really, really wonderful for keeping that theme and flair of a modern economy. I also noticed they changed up time too. I don't know if they'll talk about that, but they're really getting to the population side of things, which is a good sign because Victoria 2 was the ultimate population simulator. I should probably go back and play some of it, but it was just really fun from what I can remember, and I haven't played in a while, but just managing those pops. So they go into production and consumption. Buildings such as textile mills and wheat farms produce and often use various goods, and textile mills are super, super important, especially in the southern U.S. Later on. I think they're going to talk about some of the cotton economy, and we get to the Civil War too. At least we did in Victoria 2. I don't know if it'll cover the same time period, the exact start date with Victoria 3, but cotton mills, especially Eli Whitney's cotton gin, if you've taken U.S. history, all of that stuff, especially in its relation to textile mills, was super, super important for the South. Just speaking from someone that lives in the South, very relative to me at least. But they also have states are limited in what types of resource industries they support, and then pops consume goods to maintain their wealth. Government buildings like barracks consume goods like ammunition. Very, very standard. Nice to see buildings are going to at least have some relevance in terms of consumption, and then production. Kind of similar. I guess it's a more in-depth look at like simpler things like factories and Hearts of Iron 4, and then kind of expanding on that. But we also have trains, boats, and even automobiles, I think. So infrastructure from rivers, ports, and railways bring the world closer together, improving access to goods and movement of people, markets and regions in which goods are freely traded, one or good countries under a single market owner. I don't know, one or several countries under a single. I don't know if that's a sentence fragment, but I might have been reading that wrong. However, it's really, really fun to connect your empire. I love to just have that role-playing aspect of building up a capital from scratch, basically, and then developing your country, kind of like making it a pearl among your lesser territories and whatnot, and bringing your population to just one giant city like Constantinople. I love to see the fact that trains are being incorporated into this. I think trains were in Victoria too, but it looks like they have actual models now. And then ports, of course, always, always important, especially since this game is featured around, I guess, Great Britain to a lesser extent. So really important that they have these facets of industry locked down, and just it's going to be interesting to see if we can actually build railways, but I know this is far off in the future, so we'll just have to see with future dev diaries. And speaking of which, if you do want to see future dev diaries, please leave a like. This is kind of a pseudo dev diary. I'm just basically testing out the video format now, but if you like the content, leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. But my midway marketing pitch aside, we do have pricing with fruits and different goods. They're kind of expanding on this. They talked about it a little earlier, I think, with the brochure and goods. But all goods have a market price based on supply and demand. States with poor market access due to underdeveloped infrastructure suffer adverse local prices. And then price is everything. Underproduced goods are inexpensive and make you reliant on imports. Overproduced goods are cheap to buy but unprofitable to make. So obviously you might want to see, at least with less developed countries at this time, like Japan, which is kind of funny to say considering how just rapidly Japan developed. But I don't think you'll be starting off with any sort of Meiji restoration, at least around this time. So like as lesser developed countries like the Japanese, I could be wrong, but I think the Meiji restoration started after Victoria II's start date. But anyhow, lesser developed countries, if not Japan, really need to at least get a handle on goods, because if cheaper markets are coming in, I don't know if they'll actually be able to simulate this, but if goods are coming in from like cheaper markets or more developed countries, you're really going to need to adapt your prices, and that could send your economy into a spiral, especially just with cheaper goods out competing your own. So really important to get a control on that, and it's going to be interesting to see how technology kind of relates to that with lesser advanced civilizations at that time, kind of like Japan. So I've been kind of crapping on Japan, but it's really going to be interesting to see how they deal with Japan, its interaction like with different states like Portugal. And I know that was kind of not around Victoria II's time. I think that was like right around at the end of EU4, but I may be getting my time periods messed up. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but really important to kind of get these dynamics down. It would really be a shame if everything started off like flavorless and kind of just dull and gray. At least, like, in my opinion, it's going to be a bold take, but CK3 kind of had a bit of a bland start with a lack of unique government features. So I'm hoping Victoria 3 doesn't follow that similar path, but if it doesn't work, just slap a flavor expansion on top of it. That seems to be the pattern nowadays. But cough, Leviathan. Anyhow, pop needs. Needs can be fulfilled by a variety of goods. After needs are fulfilled, any leftover money builds wealth and standard of living. Improving standard of living leads to increased population growth and turns pops into loyalists. Worsening conditions can turn pops into radicals. I'm not too sure if loyalists and radicals existed in Victoria II. I'm sure there was some kind of variant or incarnation of that. But wealth and standard of living definitely did, at least in some form, and seems really important, and I'm glad that it is, to kind of maintain your wealth and get your amenities to your people. Though I am going to be curious to see if lesser developed nations like those in Africa are going to need to rely on amenities and stuff like that to please their people as much as they are on industry and kind of developing before the Europeans get a huge foothold in the continent and other civilizations too. But we have wages relating to amenities and population. Privately owned buildings have full control over their wages to try to maximize their profits. Countries control government and military wages, which benefit different parts of their society. Government subsidies guarantee a good wage to keep production high. And that will be interesting too, just to see how government subsidies and other government policies really interact with the economy. I know the U.S. was kind of hesitant at first to go full with subsidies. It was kind of a laissez-faire approach on the market, but I think later on with like monopolies and things like that, they at least took a more interventionist approach, especially with the advent of Teddy Roosevelt and then Taft, the big trust buster, both literally and metaphorically. But you can see here we have information workforce modifiers, very detailed, even just for logging camps in Tennessee. So I guess I unintentionally did another segue to the U.S., but really detailed for just a little factory here with the logging camps. So it's going to be really interesting to see just how this works. It looks like they're using euros, but I guess that's going to change based on the version of the game and where you're playing. Obviously, they're in Sweden, so they're going to do a more local currency. But we also have taxes. It would be really nice if they actually converted it to unique currencies, but that could be a bit ambitious. Anyhow, though, I mean, CK3 is doing languages, so I don't know how hard that would be. Anyhow, taxes tax your economy in various ways to make money for the treasury. Income taxes are deducted from wages paid. Poll taxes are per head. Consumption taxes are on goods bought. And dividends taxes are on profits made. This is getting very complicated, at least for really managing pops. It's going to be really just diverse, it looks like, from the get-go, just with all the different taxing policies you have. Obviously, these are different. You're not going to choose in between whether you go for income, poll taxes, or consumption taxes. You're going to have to manage all of these simultaneously. And it looks like they have little buttons for you to click to kind of manage that, kind of similar to the like military spending with Imperator Rome and some of those revenues features. We also have trade. I use this boat on the thumbnail. It was like a really impressive model. Obviously, they're choosing to show it off in the brochure, and I like their boldness. You can see this is some kind of steamboat. Looks like it's steam powered, but they have trade where you can use your trading fleet to import, and I actually wanted to make note of this. You can use the trading fleet to import and export goods, so maybe you don't want to just go for a passive trading approach. You could theoretically just bring your trading fleet up to some country and just start exporting a ton of goods. I don't know if the government would allow that, but I mean, theoretically, if you had a ton of competitors, you could just show up with a bunch of cheap products and kind of tank their economy. That could be really devilish and something that would be really fun to do. Though I don't know if it'll be that advanced with market strategies. I don't know how much of an effect that'll have on the economy, or if the AI will exploit that. But you can export goods where you have a competitive advantage to manufacture, obviously, and then import resources you lack or manufactured goods your people need. Trade routes can be mutually beneficial or aggressive. So it looks like it might be a possibility with these trade routes. And we also have an economic system looking kind of similar to the national revenue, and that you're kind of managing your different taxes. And then as one of the many types of laws you can change, the country's economic system drastically changes your play style. Imports are penalized under mercantilism. Isolationist countries aim for self-sufficiency like Japan. And then under free trade, pop investments are plentiful, but subsidies are limited. It's going to be really curious to see how isolationist countries kind of interact with a more free market as the game advances, and how they can kind of survive, since this is a very pop-based and economical game. It's not entirely about conquest, and the developers have made that very, very clear with their first presentation about the game after Victoria 3, which I recommend watching. Very, very insightful. I think they have that under the Victoria 3 playlist on the main channel, but I'll have to double check. Anyhow, looks like we're already at the end of the brochure. Very short, but very informative. Kind of impressed with that. But we have our conclusion. Your economy is not only your country's engine, but also shapes your population. Access to cheap resources and captive markets influence diplomacy, and then all actions reverberate through the economy, creating new economic and political challenges. So this was obviously a focus on the economy, but I'm a bit curious to see how the political sides of things works, and it'd be really nice to see them put out, the devs at Victoria 3 and Paradox to a greater extent, put out another Vikinomics style-esque guide. Obviously, this was the economy, but something related to political influence, spheres of influence. That was something very unique to Victoria 2, and develop that along with the player base. So if you guys, again, want to see more of this content, let me know. Leave a like. But this has been For Extraordinaire, and I hope you guys really like this. I've been trying to take the channel in a different direction, not just Civ-based content, and it is a bit of a risque decision. I know I've already lost a ton of subscribers, but not a ton, but a few. But I just really like talking about different strategy games, and I hope you guys will join me on the journey. So thank you guys again so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Peace.